As some of you may remember, about 5 or 6 years ago, a couple of me and some mates, we had a little band, we had a few hits, we called ourselves the Outsiders, and occasionally we're still playing together. Joining me now, One Nation leader in New South Wales, Mark Latham. Great to see you, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, hello, Rowan. Always good to be talking to you.
Good man. Okay, so I'm going to play you a bit of one of our favourite characters, someone who always brings a smile to our faces and warms the cockles of our hearts. That would be someone that you see probably too regularly in the New South Wales Parliament. That would be Treasurer Matt Kean, who was on Ben Fordham's excellent show this morning. Now, just have a listen to what he was saying.
Look, the reality is we're not ready right now because the charging infrastructure is not where it needs to be and not the technology that it needs to be. That's why we're rolling out new charging stations, which ultimately will mean that you can charge up as quickly as you can fill up your car with petrol. That's our aim here in New South Wales, and we've got the policy settings in place to do that.
Now, Mark, is this a fair thing to tell the taxpayers of New South Wales that ultimately they will be filling up their electric cars, charging their electric cars as quickly as they fill up with petrol?
Well, no, it's Kean being terribly elitist because he's using taxpayers' money, working people contributing their taxes, to provide these charging stations for those who can afford $65,000 electric vehicles. So the inequity of this is just shocking. I mean, he thinks he's saving the planet, which is a complete delusion. What he's doing is driving one of the most unfair policies you can possibly imagine, where hardworking taxpayers have got to provide a facility, a charging station, for those on a really good stipend who can afford a $65,000 vehicle. Now, meanwhile, the hardworking taxpayers are also motorists who've got their petrol-driven car. They don't get a taxpayer subsidy at the petrol station. They'll be paying record prices soon, of course, over $2 a litre just to fill up their petrol car. So the inequity of this is disgusting. And Kean has got no idea. You know, Rowan, Australia is a bit of a paradox when it comes to renewables. We have the highest rate of rooftop solar, obviously because of the sunshine, but we have the lowest rate of the take-up of electric vehicles for the obvious reason our long driving distances make them an absolute nightmare, as Warren Brown has described in the News Corp media with great hilarious effect.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Warren Brown's article. Warren will be here on the show tomorrow. He's over in London. He's a motoring enthusiast. He's at a special conference over there trying out all sorts of cars. As you said, he wrote in the Sunday Telegraph a superb piece, very funny. He's also the Daily Telegraph's cartoonist, which is where most people know him from. But he went on a test drive, Mark. So he went from Goulburn down, past Gundagai. The dog sat on the tucker box and they headed down to Griffith. He describes how they had to keep stopping, keep charging up. But the thing, apart from the kind of length of time it took, he described a couple of things which I think a lot of Australians aren't aware of. And one is this kind of Hunger Games idea that if you're out there on the roads and you know that the next charging station is in Whoop Whoop and that's, 50 k's away, and you know there's one other or maybe two other electric vehicles out there, you're going to be going hell for leather to get there before they get there so that you can charge first. And there's no camaraderie. There's none of that kind of Aussie, g'day, mate, how are you? What do you got there? That's a beaut car you got there. None of that. It's like, I'm getting there first. Got to charge up first, because if you miss out by even a second, you're then left for another half hour until you get to then queue up for your own half hour. He said this was a nightmare. Now, do Australians understand, Mark, the thing that really bothers me, apart from the humour in this, what we are talking about, what Matt Kean is talking about, is the devastation of regional Australia. Because you take away the travellers coming from the big cities, coming for the weekends, to the vineyards, to go to the farms, to go out into the country, to go bushwalking, they won't dare do it. Because the chances of your car will run out of electricity, they just won't do it. They'll go closer to home. So we're talking about the absolute economic destruction of rural and remote New South Wales, aren't we?
Here we are. And when I was younger, Rowan, there was a cartoon on TV called The Wacky Races, which sounds like the race to get to the next charging station, where they would sabotage each other's vehicles, spike their tyres, do all sorts of things to win that race. So I don't think it's like the Hunger Games, it's like the Wacky Races. And how many charging stations do you need in these country towns. Kean would have to fund many scores of them to make it practical. So none of this has been thought through. It's all part of the delusion of saving the planet. But at the end of the day, governments can't make people do things that are against their own interests, and there'll always be consumer resistance. So that is the problem. Australians don't want to drive electric vehicles long distances into our regional centres. They just don't want to do it for the obvious reason. It takes you so much longer, it's so much more expensive, it's inconvenient. You're in this wacky race to get to the next charging station. Nothing beats filling up your car with petrol and having a good leisurely drive knowing you'll get there on time pretty well, safely, without all the inconvenience of these EVs. So Kean's off in his own wacky race, and this will hurt country areas. If you're forcing people to drive electric vehicles, less tourism for the bush, less tourism and income flow for regional centres. And again, the inequity of that stands out. I mean, at every single turn, this is social injustice at play. But you've got Labor and the Greens backing it. Again, the delusion of saving the planet. So any amount of common sense would say just let consumers buy the cars they want. The electric vehicles, of course, mainly come from China. They don't come out of Europe where they've got
that's right.
Penalties for exporting electric vehicles. So they come out of China, and it just shows Matt Kean's main policy is more jobs for China.
Absolutely.